Little high, little low, little hey, little low. I guess a greeting you might recognize from the movie Stuart Little. I'm not sure why that popped into my head this morning. I mean, this evening, excuse me. But anyway, we are back, and welcome to another podcast episode of the Three Wise Potatoes. How are both of you two littles today?
I'm a little cold, but otherwise I'm okay. How are you guys doing?
I am good. I am good.
Yeah, man, I'm not bad as well. It's been
Happy
a while,
days.
actually. Yeah, I mean, it's getting chillier by the day, I suppose. Are we in the midst of full blast winter
I
in
think that'll be
South
next
Africa?
month.
Next month,
So
right?
Next month's only next week, so
September is the first of the spring, right?
spring.
Spring.
So
Yeah.
August, July. So yeah, Dean's right next month.
I mean, winter is coming then, so I can still actually say that phrase.
Well, we're in winter. It's the middle of winter. It's coming.
Okay, fine. We won't be so technical.
Yeah, July
Oh,
is
man.
Friday.
Oh shoot!
Oh,
Yeah.
shoot, yeah,
Oh,
man.
July
I mean,
is.
it's
We're going into Q3 on Friday for
Wow,
the
we're-
business folk.
Wow.
Not your financial year Q3s, just like in general, but you know.
like half year gone already. Hey,
Yep.
yeah. And I hope all of you have been keeping track of the goals that we set at the beginning of the year, because we will have a follow-up episode on
God.
how everyone's been doing with that.
What were my goals?
And and our own failures, and how we actually plan to correct the remainder half of the
Did
year.
we
So we will
actually-
have a follow-up on
Did
that.
we make a list of our goals on our podcast?
I don't know if we
Um,
declared them, but I know
we
I
didn't
did
declare them,
say
but we did
I
write
had
them
some,
down.
yeah.
Yeah. Then how can we keep a track of it for the listeners? We didn't.
Well, we'll pretty much be honest and open about
Okay.
it, and
We're
then
gonna release a PDF.
yeah, we will. Full doc on this whole
And
thing.
Okay,
appraisal.
I like this.
Yeah.
I like this.
Performance review.
Yes.
So we'd like to have 1.5 years. So I think that shouldn't take us
No,
a
it's
long
only
time.
fair. It's only fair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, we're in this journey with you as well.
Yeah.
The stuff that we say we practice, and we also hold ourselves accountable. So it'll be a fun episode.
Yeah.
That one.
Yeah.
I'm gonna shout at these two for not holding up to their goals.
You can shout now.
Wow.
I'll take it now rather than later.
Yeah, I'd rather just dish it out while you can. Yeah, we're here now. May as well carry on. Hang on, when is this performance review coming?
If I win, if I do well, I win. If I do well, do I
Is
get
there
a
time?
bonus? Do I get a bonus?
Yeah. Like, is there time to save it? Is the question.
I think you might be a bit too late on that one. Submissions have closed. It's all closed. So we're gonna do a review on the state of things, or state of your lives.
State of the nations.
Yeah, well, I guess based on the end of the financial month of June, which was last week, Friday, I suppose, or Saturday.
Hang on, can we not do our performance appraisals like closer towar's the end of the year?
No,
I mean, it is a.
no. We'll do a
yeah,
half
okay.
yearly, because
I'm
remember,
ready
as
now.
I said,
You can ask me now. I'm ready now. I'm always ready. Rain or
the
shine.
thing is, it's you wanna be able to correct and make adjustments and see what was unachievable, or a task that you thought was achievable, but how do you plan, to either mitigate that, I'm going to say, failure or failure to achieve, for the remainder of the year, that sort of thing, right? So it'll be like a workshop podcast episode, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, this guy's gonna make us do work.
Well, I mean, we should.
Performance reviews, getting sweating, and we have to do work.
Hey, I'm looking forward to the bonus.
What bonus?
You'll
Your
be
bonus is you
surprised,
get
guys,
to
you'll be
decide the next
surprised.
topic.
No, I know what I want to. Yash must partake us to Hooters. One Hooters way.
Okay, cool. I will do so. That's
Are you
the,
driving
that's
too?
the end
Or
game.
we Ubering?
I'll drive as well.
Oh, best.
Okay, cool. Bring your empty stomachs and your drinking gut as well.
Dunzo.
As I said, I'm ready now. Coach.
Well, we have another topic of discussion this evening. I mean, most of the discussions we've had in the past were about the positive of self. I guess today is a bit negative in discussion. As with most things, there's always like a dark side, and it's something that we will discuss today. A position in the dark side, at least. No, we're not going to discuss Darth Vader and the Force and stuff. Please No. But we'll be
Spoiled
discussing
sport.
a portion of the darkness, and that's called toxicity or internal toxicity.
Mm.
I mean, toxicity comes in many forms, but I guess we'll start off being specific about it. And in reference to a person's life, or yours, for example, what does it mean to you? So, what does toxicity mean to you? Stumped by the question. Anyone want to go first?
Dino, you wanna go first?
Sure. Toxicity. I suppose you could look at it on the base level definition of something that is, you know, quite bad for you in the sense that it's poisonous in a sense.
Hmm.
It has an adverse effect on you. So that could be people, it could be situations, it could be your own decision making, but essentially things that lead you to be worse off than you were before. I would say is what it is.
Okay, cool.
I, I,
Good.
I was while Dean was actually speaking about that, it raised the thing to say, listen, why don't you Google what that is? Um,
We
so
have that ability now.
yeah, so
That's true.
it's the quality of being toxic or poisonous, or the quality of being
Mm-hmm.
very harmful or unpleasant in a pervasive or insidious way. So like purposeful, um, not negativity, but like um, poisonousness, if I
And
can
that's
say
and
that.
that's directed toward yourself.
Well, are
Um,
we talking about self toxicity or toxicity being toxic
Yeah, it
around
could
other
be
people?
internal or
Yeah,
well,
external.
we're gonna start off with, I guess,
external.
just that raw definition, and then we'll do external, and
Okay,
then
yeah.
we'll talk about
So
internal later on.
yeah,
Yeah.
sure. So the toxicity to us would obviously be like me being toxic to somebody else, like always being negative towards them, always being unpleasant towards them, not being nice, even if they do something nice, you'd be like, no, I don't like what you did, or you didn't do it in the right way that you should have done it. You know,
Mm-hmm.
that's like,
Manipulative,
yeah,
things like
exactly, yeah,
that. You
manipulative.
know?
Um, it's just general all around, like the guy that people don't want, guy or girl that people don't want to be around.
Yeah, narcissists have a high toxicity
Yeah,
level.
yeah, true, true.
That's true. I mean, specifically then in your lives, what toxicity or and toxicity levels have you experienced?
Oh,
You don't have to reference specific situations, but
every day, man, every day. Like
wow,
you have
okay,
you have like work colleagues and stuff like that that like don't like their job, right?
right,
And like I've gotten to this point now where I'm actually comfortable, right?
right,
Like not comfortable as in like I'm situated. I'm more like I'm I'm um uh, ple-
Develop resilience or an immunity to it.
pleasant in a pleasant mood, right?
mm,
Most of the time. And then you come across someone that's like toxic at work, right? They're like negative. They're like, no, you should like everything is against what you're doing, right? And
yeah,
there's like you'll deal with this person, and no matter what positive thing you're putting forward, right? And this is not only at work, I mean in your life, right? Any positive thing you put forward, that person is always in opposition to that, right? So
right,
you'll be like, let's go here, or this is a good way to look at the solution, right? And they'll be like, no, but why don't you do it this way? Because that way
yeah,
it might work that way, but this way it might also work. And you'll be like, but why don't you try this one first? And then if we don't like it, there's another option. You get those types of people that are
mm-hmm,
always in opposition of what you're doing. And it's not to say
Yeah.
that they're right or you're wrong or whatever it is, but you don't have to be that toxic all the time, you know? And I have some people like that around me. So I feel it every now and then.
and I like
Okay.
what you kind of mentioned as well. It's like you trying to be the positive influence in that space and
Yeah,
time at that point.
yeah, yeah,
Trying to bring that calm energy to that situation, right?
yeah,
But unfortunately, their mindset isn't, excuse me, isn't about that. It's just about either being in full opposition all the time to what you're saying,
yeah,
or just being on their chain of thought, which is that full negative burst.
yeah, sure. Sure, sure.
You know. So in certain instances, did the transgressor against yourself ever realize that they were being toxic?
No, you see, that's the thing. When you're in that state, right,
Mm,
you're not necessarily seeing yourself as toxic, right? you see yourself as I am adding to the situation in a certain way. Now they may not feel like they're doing something wrong. And technically they may not be a bad person. Like when they're doing something toxic, they may not be a bad person. They may be in their own way trying to shed light on a different solution, for example. And I'm not only talking about
Mm-hmm.
work, I'm talking about anything in life, right? Say for example you have a mate, right? And every time you're talking about something, they're like, no, why don't you do it this way? Right? And you're like, but I do this, you know? And they're like, but why don't you do it this way? And they're not purposefully being toxic or negative, but the it's how they continuously oppose what you're doing. For you, for me personally, I feel that's toxic because I prefer to have somebody who sees things or tries to see things the way I see them, and then also in a different way. If they see a better way, explain it to me that way. You know, and maybe that's how I see things as toxic. Um, uh, but I would generally, to answer your question, I would generally not see that person as they. I feel like someone that is toxic doesn't see themselves as toxic.
No, it's the same way a narcissist doesn't think of themselves as being a narcissist.
Yeah, yeah, sure, yeah. Yeah, that's also the best way to put it. I feel like people aren't purposefully toxic. They've learned to deal with things in that way.
And I have a follow up to that, I guess. Did you ever address that with them?
No, I don't. Um, it purely that scenario for me is not something that I would personally like to delve into the personal aspect of it because for me that's a work situation, right? But if
Yeah.
we're not in a work situation and someone a mate of mine is consistently being toxic, for example, which I don't
Mm-hmm.
really have because I mean I keep friends that are like not always in opposition of me, but also know when to tell me I'm doing something. But I if I had that in my life, I'd be like, dude, what are you doing? You know,
Yeah.
we're consistently butting heads. What is this? You know,
Yeah.
um, and it may not be toxic, but for me, I feel like that's toxic because I generally, as I said, try to be in a pleasant, positive, open, forward mood, right? And when I find that
Mm-hmm.
someone's in consistent opposition to that, like what's the reason? You know,
And Dean, did you, I guess, with the transgressors that you perhaps have come across, did they realize they were being toxic? And the follow up to that is, did you address it with them?
So I tend to be a little bit more confrontational than good, right? Especially if I feel like it's becoming a problem for me. And a
Mm-hmm.
lot of the time, they very combative
Mm-hmm.
if you call them out. And then if you sort of like, this is where you're being difficult or you're being needlessly negative or resilient on points, I don't understand where it's coming from. They'll sometimes deviate to being the victims, like, oh, I had no idea, I'm just trying to help. And I'm like, okay, that's when I start to get a little bit more annoyed because it's like you knew full well what you're doing. And you're sometimes either baiting or gaslighting myself or other colleagues is becoming a problem. And I generally do try to call out, and there'll always be a very quiet spell after that where they will be on their best behavior. But eventually they kind of fall back to their old ways. And generally, like I'm lucky in the sense that I find myself in teams where those individuals eventually find their way out. Sometimes it's like a year down the line where you have to put up with this person, but eventually they're gone because the whole environment doesn't want them and they know they're being difficult and they just get moved on to a different part of the business or they move on themselves, but they won't be part of your team anymore because you kind of want people that want progress and positivity in your team and you kind of set the team structure like that so that it's almost like self-correcting energy in a sense. I don't know if that makes sense.
but what you explained is like textbook narcissism.
Yeah, it's like the minute you call them out, they want to, oh, I'm the victim. It's like, no, you knew exactly what you were doing.
But
Right. But perhaps,
that's a good question though. I mean, sorry, Ash.
yeah, no.
Does that are the two like naturally always linked?
But
The
victim mentality and
Narcissism
narcissism and
and
narcissism,
toxicity.
I think so. Narcissism and toxicity, yeah, I think very, very closely.
Okay.
Um, I think like two sides of the same coin, or maybe they're one and the same. I don't know how to visualize it for
Yeah.
you, but would say yes, they're
Because I
in there.
like personally I always thought like the reason that they're separate, like separate words and separate meanings, is because sometimes you can be toxic but not a narcissist. You know, Maybe you're just
Yeah,
being
I think
toxic. Yeah,
that's exactly what I was about to
yeah.
say. It's like I think all narcissists are toxic, but not all toxic people are narcissists
Maybe that,
because it
yeah,
could just be a phase.
yeah. Or maybe the toxic person doesn't know that they're doing this because they've always been like that from whatever they've learned in their past, you know?
Hmm.
And
Yeah, I
And
mean,
perhaps no one has spoken up
yeah, yeah,
to them. Like for
yeah,
example,
yeah, it's not been
Dean.
addressed.
yeah,
Exactly
yeah,
right. They just don't know. And then, Good, you mentioned a lack of communicating properly. Like if they, like you would prefer if they communicated to you in a more understanding and a understanding way instead of a more demanding way,
yeah. So
and their way sort of thing, pushing their stuff onto you and pushing, uh, I guess, a lot of themselves onto you as well.
yeah,
You
so
know.
so like Dean said, we deal with things differently, right? But
Mhm.
I don't I personally, it's not that I don't want to be combative. It's that I, I've been taking to recently just dealing with what's in my space, right? And if someone is trying to change what's in my space, that's not going to happen. You can do whatever you want, right? But it's not going to
Mhm.
change how I feel and what I think and what I'm doing. And if you have something to add that's better, even if through your toxicity you raise a point that makes sense to me, right? I'll
Mhm.
use it. But if you're being toxic, then I'll either do one of two things. And like Dean says, you call them out on it, right? And I
Mhm.
generally won't do that because it depends on the situation and the person. Like if it's somebody that I actually want to bring it out of and say, listen, what's going on? Or if it's somebody that I'm not, remember that it also involves a certain imparting of yourself into that situation, right?
Yeah.
And it just depends on the situation. I most of the time I'm not combative because I feel like it's just sometimes it's just not necessary for me to do that. I don't know
I
if
don't
it's a
like it. Like I hate doing that. But like in the work environment, I feel like if you don't, then you kind of stuck with this person for a longer period of time.
sure. So
So like rather get the discomfort out the way early. I mean, I hate doing it, but it's like you rather just rip the band-aid off quickly.
yeah. So
And one of the things I'd like to mention as well is that not a lot of people have persons in their lives like for example what Dean did, call them out on stuff. They won't have those people that are gonna call out their BS, for lack of a better phrase, when they're in this negative mode or in this toxic mode. And so that correction doesn't come from within their own circle. um, and sometimes in life you do need correction from those closest to you and from those who know you to be able to speak up and speak up without, I guess, what's the word I'm looking for?
Fear of retaliation
Yes, fear of retaliation
uh,
and things like that, right?
or
To be
judgment.
able to, yes, and judgment as well, to speak up in someone's life to help them improve their lives, and they might not have that on their side, which is why they,
We're very
when we,
fortunate in that sense.
yeah, and which
Because
is
like
why
if
when
we
I
do it to each other, we know it comes from a place of love and friendship.
correct, which is why they might not have that in their lives, and they might not know. But not knowing as well is also not an excuse. It's just finding a way to explain,
Well, they do
how
say
some people.
ignorance is bliss. So
I suppose.
yeah, I just yeah. No, you're right.
I mean, one of the other things I'd like to ask as well is like, how do you identify a person with those traits? Like they don't exhibit it on first meeting,
Yeah.
but obviously over time it shows themselves.
Hey, some people exhibit it on first, second, boss.
yeah, like you can see
Yes.
it very
You
early. Like
walk in the
if you
room.
see someone that takes pleasure in other people's agony, that's a
Mm,
toxic person. I'm sure some people may not agree, but to me that is a toxic person. I mean, it might be funny when you're a kid or but it's not nice. But as you get older, like if you're well into your 30s and you start trolling people and you can see they're visibly upset but you continue, then you're the ass. You're the toxic
and
person.
I like that you brought up early childhood, because that was one of my other questions as well. It's environment and upbringing.
Oh yeah.
And what you see is what you do, sort of thing, right? And what you're trying to replicate in your circle, in your environment when you're growing up, because those are your formative years. And like you're saying, if
Very
you're part of
impressionable,
a,
yeah.
yes, if you're part of a group or you're part of a clique that kind of bullies other kids on the playground and you know has these nasty sayings and things like that, then if that's built up over time, it just gets progressively more dangerous over time and flows into your adult
And
ages as
progressively
well.
more
Yes,
toxic.
yes, yes. So
Yeah.
it exhibits from I guess from a small right up to when we're grown up. Something we kind of need to watch out for, and patterns we kind of need to break for future generations, in my view.
Absolutely.
It's tough to notice it within yourself firstly, and then have to try to deal with it. I think it's you have to really dig deep, you know, to
But isn't
solve.
responsible parenting such an important part? Then, like, it's even more important because, like, a child doesn't necessarily have that context, but a parent must be there to say, "Look, what you're doing is wrong.
Yeah,
You're making this person feel bad, and it's amusing to you, but that's wrong."
yeah, but remember, where does it come from? Where does toxicity come? It comes from what they've learned from watching their parents or the people around them as well, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or it's a reaction to what's happening to them, right? So technically, a parent that has to tell their child is a parent that's noticed it, but is a parent that's not creating that, right?
Well, the
Yes.
child could pick up
Totally
the
right.
toxicity from the friends, right? And then the
Mm.
parent's responsibility is
Yeah.
to correct that. But if the parent's toxic, then that child's in a tough spot.
I don't know. I never always thought that if someone picks it up from their friends, right, they'd have to be with those friends continuously for a very long period of time, right? And then
Mm.
when they met a new group of friends, they'd have to stay that way. And that's not always the case. I mean, when you meet a new group of friends, you generally change slightly, right? Um,
You do,
but
but I don't know if it's necessarily for a long period of time or it's for really crucial, high emotive periods of
maybe,
time. Because I mean, if you're new and you're a little bit anxious about meeting friends, and you kind of like start out in a group, and there's this moment where you either toe the line or you break ranks, and maybe the group is bullying someone. Do you toe the line or do you break
yeah,
ranks?
sure.
Because if you break ranks, you're now an outsider and you run the risk of being bullied, or you toe the line and you become toxic with them,
Yeah, but
and then that
yeah,
can ingrain very
yeah,
quickly.
but someone that sits on the fence that closely is easily swayed, right? So in a different situation, they might break ranks.
I don't know, societal pressure in school, bro. That's a
Ah, it is rough. It
that's
is
a
rough.
beast of a
I'm
thing.
just trying to, I'm trying to think of like benefit of the doubt sort of situation. Because for me, I feel like it's always formed from like the house, you know?
Yeah, I mean, you might be right.
I don't know. I'm
But
not.
if you don't
I
exhibit
not
it,
don't
saying.
know.
I'm
I
not
don't know
saying.
enough
I'm not saying what
research
you're
to
wrong,
look at
but
it, but I mean, like, you're probably right.
I feel like it comes from that environment more than it comes from. But I'm also thinking about like the quintessential bully. Quintessential bully has
Oh, the
problems at home,
quintessence, yeah, it's
and then
generally one parent or a
yeah,
sibling
yeah.
that's abusive to
But
that
you're
child, and
hundred
then they
percent,
take it out
yeah.
on the rest of the world.
You're 100% correct. It could come from the fact that they've learned that this is how we need to be friends with each other by being toxic. You know?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like, oh, this is how I gain acceptance into the group.
Sure. Sure.
playful jeers. It starts with playful jeers at one another,
Yeah.
Mm.
and then well, grows. I mean, we've all been part of playground antics, right?
Well, coach, you
No
don't do
part of
that
the
much,
world.
huh?
What?
You don't do like playful tunes.
I used to, but not anymore. It's not. I don't think it is part of me now. Y'all can tell me, really, and
No,
correct me now.
no,
To be honest.
I don't think
Yeah,
so.
he's more like self-deprecating than anything else.
Yeah, I definitely, I
so,
agree, I agree.
so where I learned self-deprecating is from our favorite psychologist, Mr. Jordan.
Oh yeah,
So one of
what's his
his
stance
things
on it?
is, yeah. So what he says is in his book, the 12 Rules for Life.
Yeah, yeah.
Is it about making yourself more approachable?
Yes. So you
Okay.
self-deprecate first, and not give anyone else the opportunity to do so.
But that's
Um,
Oh
so.
no,
so you
that's not
don't
how I
use
interpreted that
so
at
so you
all.
don't so you don't use so you don't give anyone the ammo to use it against you, that sort of
But
thing.
That's clever.
isn't that a
And
bad?
automatically you disarm any situation
Yeah, but
by
isn't
self-deprecating.
that a isn't that a
Cheat
uh,
code.
no, it's like self-deprecating is the word, but it's like why? Okay. I'm just
No,
like,
I'm not.
why?
I'm
So
not putting
I
myself down in any
interpreted that very
situation. By the
differently.
way, I'm not putting myself down in those situations.
Yeah.
It's just making light of funny situations that happen to me.
Yeah,
For
that's
example, I'll
exactly
tell
it.
you one
Okay.
now. I'll tell you one now.
Okay.
Like I walked into the big glass door at Mall of Africa,
We
and it
know
was a
your
it was a
forehead was
massive
left,
loud
like there
bang.
was a
And
forehead print,
I don't
dude,
remember
I
that.
tell
exactly in the
everyone about
spot.
that story
I
first.
don't remember
You
that.
know? No, okay, good. I don't think you were
I
there
don't know if you were
because we
there.
went to
Yeah.
watch
Probably.
Harry Potter.
Oh, you did it
No,
on that
no, it
day.
was not
Not
Harry
Harry
Potter.
Potter.
It
did-
was
It
Fantastic
was
You
Beasts.
did it at.
Fantastic
Oh, so
Beasts.
you did it at this age.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
Yeah.
he did it at this year.
This year, a few months ago,
I
it was
s-
funny as hell. Everyone is laughing, but that's cool. I'm cool with that sort of thing. So
So
I bring those sort of topics up and first. So that's the
okay,
idea of
okay.
self-deprecating to disarm situations in front of people who you know want to use it against you.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it
That's
So
the
also
point
makes
of
you
it.
it makes you less threatening as well to
that's a
people.
bit of a
So
hard
you're a
situation.
lot less intimidating to
But it
people.
also gives you power in the situation as well.
No,
It gives you control
I
and
don't.
power
I
in
don't
that
agree with that.
situation. Well, for
I think
me in
control
particular.
I would agree with, not
Yeah.
necessarily power, but I've always interpreted it as you make yourself less intimidating, or like if you're in a standoffish situation
Sure.
with people that are potentially insecure,
Mm.
you reassure everyone and like you diffuse situations very quickly. Not necessarily for someone to attack you, but more in the sense that someone doesn't feel like they need to defend themselves.
Mm.
It's
If
like,
I
oh, this
was
person's also flawed.
if I was a narcissist and you did that in front of me, I would put my foot on.
Yeah, but what's a narcissist gonna do after you've already made the joke?
Or, yeah, exactly.
Dude,
And
they
have
Like,
just
what are you gonna
everyone
do?
they
laugh
Make
can
fun of
I'm
me
already
more?
made. Yeah.
they can keep piling on.
It's like,
That's
well, your
cool, but
jokes
then
are not
that's
as
cool with
your
me.
jokes about me aren't as funny as my jokes about me. So good luck with that.
No, look, as long as you comfortable with it, right?
Who's
Yeah.
laughing now?
No, but Dean,
All of us.
okay, so Dean, knowing you, I think if you were in a situation and you did exactly that, right? So you cracked a joke about yourself, right?
Yeah,
And if a narcissist tried to add on to that, I think you'd probably turn around and give them a really nice worded talking to.
throat punch.
No, but
That's
you see what I'm saying. You see what I'm saying? It's that you can diffuse a situation, and like Yash says, it's in front of people that he knows, right? That
Yeah.
would also make the
Would
joke
want
about
to.
it, right? Also make the joke
Yes,
about it.
yes, yes.
But
Yes.
Yeah, but you see,
Yash
there
wouldn't.
it's I get what you're saying, but it also depends on the context. So if it's a bunch of completely new people, right, and I make that joke about myself and everyone's kind of laughing, and then
Yeah,
someone
that's cool.
Yeah,
decides to
sure.
now stick
It's
their
an
foot in it
icebreaker.
even more.
It's an icebreaker.
No. Like, let me continue on the
Yeah,
chain of thought
yeah.
you're giving, right? So
Yeah.
I make the joke, people find it funny, but there's one person that wants to put me down on top of all of that.
Yes.
What you've then done is you've highlighted to the rest of the group that this person is actually a very toxic person. And you can then approach it one of two ways. You can then be combative with that person, or you can just let it play out, let everyone, like, just reveal them completely, and then just point blank go, are you a narcissist?
No,
And then it's
that's
just
rough,
like
dude.
dead silence.
That is rough.
End game.
That is
Yeah,
rough.
but the thing is,
And then you watch them play the victim card.
we shy away from these conversations in open public. For what reason, I have no clue.
Oh, good just seen me. I don't.
No. I mean, in general, people shy away from tough conversations and calling people out on things. It's
This is why I have so few friends.
it's something I don't agree with, and it's a part of society that unfortunately has become too PC in certain areas as well. Yeah. Anyway,
So
off
You see it
topic.
more. You see it a lot more with brown kids, though. Like they're a lot more willing to let things slide in the favor of gaining acceptance and not rocking the boat, because I think there's that scarcity mindset that our families all came from. Like just be quiet, unseen. Toe the line.
So I agree with you, right? I agree with the fact that Dean, you should call people out on it, right? Especially when you see it. But
There's a nice way to do it, though.
there is a nice way to do it. But for me, I've also learned that if I do that, right, it's going to take when I think about it and I'm like, do I want to do this and what impact is it going to have on me, right? And I'm the type of person that if I call you out on it and it will help you, I'll still feel bad about doing it, right? Because
That's
Yes.
not okay. I get what you're saying,
Yeah,
but it's more
I'm
like if I
embarrassing
do
that
it.
person in front of other people. If I took them aside and did it separately, I would feel fine with it. But if I did it in that situation, I'd still feel bad about it because as much as that person is being a bad person, right? I wouldn't subject them to something like that personally. You know?
I
Yeah.
you're 100% right on that, right? But
Yeah.
if the person is quite clearly a narcissist,
Sure.
you pulling them aside, it just essentially tells them that you are you're going to play by the rules and they can play outside of those rules. And it doesn't, in my experience at least, it hasn't changed much when you pull them aside.
Sure.
But
Sure.
if you can see, if it's different, if the person is maybe just unknowingly taking things a bit too far,
Yeah.
that's when you pull them aside and say, okay, you know what, you were a little bit offside earlier.
Yeah.
Can you just watch that?
Yeah.
And that's different though, because you like, I suppose maybe when you know the person better, you can tell, right? This
Yeah. Yeah.
person's not a bad person. They just were pushing too many buttons,
Yeah.
and I needed to speak to them. But if you also know that the person's very clearly a narcissist, if you call them out in front of people, they're going to be less willing to do it to others.
True. So I think you taking it from the point that if you nip that in the bud, they won't do it to other people as well.
Well, they'll be more
Yeah.
hesitant
Sure.
because they know, like, they'll think twice, like, is this person going to call me in front of
Is Dean
everybody again?
around and
Because that
will he
didn't
do
work
it to
out
me
so well.
again?
Or is there another one like him?
Emotional damage.
Yeah, sure. No, look, I
I mean,
mean, but yes, you see, there's two different ways that
yeah.
it can be done. Look,
Well, it
mine
can. Sure.
necessarily doesn't call the person out, but for me internally, it doesn't really matter because at the end of the day, I have to live with me, and that person has to live with themselves.
Sure. I
No, there's
mean,
another side of it. Like, if
yeah.
you care, if this person's a close friend of yours
Yeah.
and they were being toxic without realizing,
Yeah,
that's generally a thing that I will take offline. It's just going to be
Yeah.
a me and them conversation. It's like, I
Yeah.
need to talk to you about something. You made me feel bad.
yeah,
This is where it comes from. This is why you made me feel bad. You obviously didn't understand why you made me feel bad, but I'm giving you the context, and please don't do it again.
yeah.
And generally with your friends, they'll be like, okay, snap, I didn't actually realize I was being like this to you. Obviously, that wasn't my intention, but I'll take it on board.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Adulting,
100%.
you know.
This is,
No, but
this is
that-
the
but
unwritten
see, that-
rules of adulting.
No, but that I 100% agree with because if you know the
Yes.
person and you actually care about them, you should tell them because I mean, if you don't, like, who's gonna tell them? Firstly,
Or even if you don't care about them, is if you know that they're not actually a bad person, they were just overstepping without realizing.
yeah.
That's an offline conversation
Yeah.
between you and them.
Mm-hmm.
Also, it also raises
Agreed.
other questions that nobody else in their friendship
Yeah,
True.
but I mean, like you just said, we don't have enough of these conversations. Or Yash was saying, we don't have enough of these conversations. We shy away from it.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. Yeah.
So, I'd like you both to take a quick moment. I don't know how many moments I can give, and think back to a situation that felt kind of ugly to you both. And did you ever reflect and analyze your part in the situation? What role did you play, whether it was negative or positive? Did you ever look back on that?
Yeah, look,
Yeah.
there have been a couple of work situations, and I can say quite comfortably that I didn't handle them particularly well. Like if someone is directly confrontational with me and starts shouting with me, then if I'm like sane in the moment, then I'll maybe address it well. But there was one particular instance where I just started shouting back, and it wasn't healthy. It was very destructive for the environment. It wasn't the right way to go about things. It was just I was just acting out of instinct because I felt threatened.
And just a quick follow-up to that. What was the outcomes of that reflection? Did you introduce any corrections in yourself going forward if you were to come up with that, with that same situation again?
So there are definitely corrections that it's like try to nip these things in the bud a lot quicker, because that individual was, that person had a reputation for shouting at others. And no one really addressed it, and then people would shout back, and then it got so to the point where people would refuse to work with that person.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like it doesn't need to escalate that quickly, and that's why I say, like, now I would rather address it with the person early than let it get to that point. So my comments that I made earlier about, when you're dealing with someone in the workplace, I'd rather address it with them early and rip off that band-aid. It's a difficult, uncomfortable conversation, but I would rather do it early on than have it escalate to the point where there's shouting matches happening.
And yourself, Prash?
Yeah,
Ugly situation.
yeah,
Did you reflect?
quite a few. Not that I end up in situations on purpose or anything, but
Well, none of us do.
No, it's
I'm
true.
just like trying to. It's not like you have to take a moment to remember. They come back pretty quickly because it's very
Yeah, true.
emotional situations, right? But
Mhm.
I'm very different to Dean. I'm a person that's retroactively retroactively takes action, right? So if I have ever been toxic to somebody and it takes me time and I realize it, or they've told me I've been toxic towards them, or I've upset them, then naturally my first response would be, listen, my bad. I'm sorry. I apologize. Blah 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 blah. Right?
Hmm.
Not blah blah, but like you go
No,
through
an earnest
an
apology.
earnest
Yeah.
apology, right? And if you made a mistake, then you apologize for it. Um, but for me, that's more or less where it stops. I mean, you take corrective action and try not to be that person again, right? But also,
Hmm.
if people do it to me, uh, generally, I realize very quickly that that person is not someone that I need around me. Or if
Hmm.
they're being toxic and I know that that's not their normal case, then I'll discuss it with them. But it's been very rare. I think maybe once or twice where I've actually told somebody, dude, what you're doing is wrong, right? Um, the rest of the time, it just made me realize even more that this person's not somebody that I want around, you know?
Hmm.
And in all eventualities, it worked out, like Dean said. I don't know what the word you used, Dean's were, but um, uh, where the person sort of left after a while, you know?
Like a self-correcting energy
Self,
kind of
that's
thing.
it, yeah, self-correcting energy. So it's like it worked out like that because I naturally just went towards where all the positivity was, or the things that I preferred or situations preferred being in. Um, I don't know if that answers your question. That's how retroactively I'm a very retroactive person. I don't deal with things instantly sometimes. It takes me some time to think about what happened, what needs to
Hmm.
happen. Like I'm good in high pressure situations when I need to be, but when there's things that I need time to think about, I take the time to think about them before I act.
Right.
And I
I mean, you're not it's not like a heat of the moment, a snap reaction.
yeah, look, if someone is
I
shouting
seem
at
to
me,
be like that
I can
sometimes.
easily like Dean says, if I'm
You can
sane,
clap back.
if I can, but I generally
With my words.
I generally don't do that because I I'm not nice when I'm angry. Like I'll find the thing that's wrong with that person, and instead of being
Mhm.
toxic back, I'll target that, right? So if you're being toxic towards me over something else, I'll literally pick something about you that I know is emotionally
Mm.
going to hurt you, and then target that, which is it's not even
Emotionally
fighting on the
damaged.
same level,
Yeah.
you know.
No, it's yeah, using personal
I
information
would
against somebody. Yeah.
that's why I
Coach brings
genuinely
a bazooka to a knife fight.
that's yeah. So I try not to fight on that level because I know if
Mm.
I do that, it's like I won't
It's
even I
GG.
don't fight fair, you know.
That's true. I mean, it's different. It'll be like different levels
Yeah,
because you go for the juggler sort of thing.
yeah. I
I
don't.
Coach
remember.
is Bruce Bannering this.
Yeah.
He's like, you won't like me when I'm angry,
No,
so
but
I'm just gonna
it's not. It's
walk
not
The
it
truth
about.
off.
is,
It's not
Cap, I'm
about.
always angry.
It's not about like I'm gonna kick your ass. It's just like I don't fight fair because if you open up the can of worms, you go. I'm literally gonna be like, listen, if you're gonna take that tone with me, then you might as well just take all of this, and then I just let them have it. Because
Mm.
once you upset me, that's it. There's no point in like putting the cat back into the bag.
Yeah.
Okay. Coach played his trap card.
So
If you know
yeah,
Yu-Gi-Oh, Coach played his trap
that's
card.
generally why I have to think about things sometimes.
Yeah. I think it's good to introduce this a Stoic called Seneca.
No,
And there's a
to be honest with you, it's actually bad,
yeah
right? It's not a good thing.
yeah.
You should be able
Hmm.
to voice your opinions without getting angry, right? And you
Yeah.
should be able to voice your opinions without clapping back, right?
Sure.
And that I can do that, right? But I tend to shy away from it because if I get angry, then uh,
No, you sometimes anger, like we've been
you
saying, it's
lose
just
it,
a heat of the
you know.
moment thing. You just
I mean,
it's unfortunate.
we've been angry
I've done it.
been angry at each other over
Oh
Oh,
yeah.
stupid
loads
things,
of times.
right?
Yeah.
Stupid things,
That's
right?
true.
And
Dumb
and
things.
you've seen how we've reacted against each other, right? In
Yeah.
our youth, as I would say, right?
Why
Yeah.
didn't
But
you buy awards?
yeah. I mean, dude, it
Noob.
was bad. Like it was
It
bad.
was rage.
The
Yeah.
reaction, the resultant reaction was exponential compared to what actually happened, right?
Yeah,
And
true.
and it's like, how did you get from zero to like a raving volcano in like 10 seconds? You know, but
I don't know.
but
I didn't cast one
but
spell.
but we've all done that, right? We've all done that.
No.
And I think it's, for me, it's a thing of like, I'm so past that now. Like, if it takes me so much to get angry, like,
Mm,
I'll be more confused about what happened than be angry. I'll be like, how is this possible? How did you do that? You know, and not,
yeah.
I'm gonna kick your ass. It just, I don't know.
I mean, you know what? There are still triggers though.
Yeah,
Like
for
you're
sure.
saying, there are still triggers that somehow will trigger you to be toxic towards someone
Yeah.
else, to different levels. I see that within myself, and I'm busy working on them right now. But you know, I wanted to just introduce the Stoic Seneca, and he, like all the philosophers and do-gooders that we kind of listen to and things, say it's 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 like the art of not responding, um, like you're saying, based on anger, based on environment, based on anything else, just not letting anything else affect you. Just using your I guess your stoicness and your calmness, um, and responding back in that manner, which you rightfully say you want to do and you want to do all the time.
Yeah.
Um,
What, when you say Stoic
so
Seneca, what is Stoic Seneca?
so Seneca was a Stoic. He is the like a one of those
Oh,
Roman
okay.
philosopher
Oh,
types. Yeah. So he I can't remember the name of the book right now. It's about something about being a Stoic.
okay. Okay.
Um, yeah. So when you read that book, it's just giving you I guess a plan on how to just be kind of calm in every situation and take everything, you know,
Mm,
um, under consideration and not react, not be so reactive.
yeah.
So that's what the Stoics kind of teach people.
Okay.
Anyway, I just wanted to bring that in because we were talking about heat of the moment, spur of the moment conversations, and how to not let environmental factors affect us internally. So moving on, there's a phrase. I think it's a rage phrase right now. Toxic masculinity.
Ooh.
Hmm.
Everyone is familiar with that one.
I honestly thought you were
Um,
gonna do a different phrase, but we'll get to that.
okay, we'll do it.
Yeah, it's
We'll
the
do it
other
next.
one, the
Oh,
counterbalance, isn't it?
okay, cool. Okay, I know. Okay, cool. So what's toxic masculinity to you guys, or what have you seen it being used in social media and other forms of media as well?
I have one name for
Yeah.
you, Andrew Tate.
Okay.
Yeah.
That guy is personified toxic masculinity.
Right.
I don't know if you've
I
seen
think
him.
there's a massive misinterpretation between what is actually toxic masculinity, or like people like Andrew Tate. A lot of people would look at him and be that's toxic masculinity, but what I think it's actually his suppressed femininity coming out in a toxic manner.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's
Possibly.
what it is. I really do. I think
Possibly.
it's his like everyone has masculine and feminine energy, right? It
Yes.
doesn't matter whether you're male or female, how you identify, he, she, they, them. You all have a masculine and a feminine energy, and there's a balance that exists, right?
Mm.
But with men that are deemed as toxic masculine, if you look at what masculine energy is, it's stable energy, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's essentially the container in which things can be created, but that's like it's the land, and the feminine energy is the ocean, right?
Yeah.
One is ever changing and one is constantly stable, and they kind of bounce off each other and keep each other in check. So toxic masculinity is when a male withdraws completely into utter solitude, cuts himself off to the world, and that's when you become unreachable. But when your feminine energy is suppressed to the point where it becomes destructive,
Mm.
how that it then comes out in a man is when he's hyper aggressive. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's like the child that's not being given what he wants and he fights back.
Exactly,
Mm.
exactly. So I think that the definitions maybe need reworking, but that's my interpretation of it.
I think you pretty much. I think you pretty much got it on the head.
On the button.
Yeah, and a
But
guy like Andrew Tate doesn't realize that his feminine energy has been suppressed so long that it's manifesting itself as toxic, but he's a man. So it's like if you had to try and explain this to him, he'd probably break his brain. But like you just see smoke
but
coming
but
out.
but is the phrase agnostic of gender as well? Can it
Yes,
be
I think
applied
so.
across
But I think the reason why it is maybe a little bit easier to grasp when you
apply to
attach a
guys?
gender
Yeah.
to it
Mm.
is because like you do generally have more testosterone if you're a man than you are a woman.
Hmm.
Um, so like that aggression comes from that. Maybe I don't know. I'm not like a doctor where I can definitely tell you this because I'm now taking like emotional concepts and tying them to chemistry and physics. And I know not physics, the physical. And I know like emotions are essentially chemical reactions in the brain.
Hmm.
Um, but I am nowhere near qualified enough to be making that kind of distinction. This is just my
Well, look,
interpretation, my
if yeah,
interpretation of it.
yeah, if we had to label it, like the only way I learn all these things is by doing research, googling all that stuff. Right? So if you just Google it,
Yeah.
toxic masculinity refers to the notion that some people's idea of manliness, inverted quote commas, perpetuates domination, homophobia, and aggression. Um, and I think
See, I don't
that's,
think that is actually toxic masculine. I think that's the suppressive nature of what the feminine would normally find balance in.
but
And that feminine energy is
wouldn't
lashing out.
wouldn't that be exactly toxic masculinity? Because you've gotten to this point where you're toxic masculine, right? And you're essentially trying to suppress your own femininity, and that's what, and you react in aggression and domination, things like
You could be right. I think where I'm getting stuck is the term of what masculine energy and feminine energy is. So if there was a poisoning of the masculine energy,
that.
then it's when a male withdraws completely and isolates him from himself and the world, and essentially, I'm gonna go be an island. Or if there's a poisoning of the feminine energy within a man, it then manifests as that aggressive behavior
When you say
and overcompensating
poisoning
behavior.
of the feminine energy, do you mean like
I'm
they
using poisoning as a swap for toxic.
purposefully? Okay, so purposefully like trying to neutralize it,
Yeah,
or
like if your masculine energy were to become corrupted, for example,
yeah,
or become
but
poisoned
it,
or toxic or
right.
whatever it
So
is.
exactly what you're saying, right? The way the person would react if they did that or tried to suppress the feminine side would force them to being violent, controlling of others, aggressive, uh,
Yeah,
acting
because
super
like
tough,
the
treating
feminine
yeah,
is a chaotic slash destructive energy by nature, right?
yeah.
That's why it's likened to the ocean. It can be completely life giving or it can be completely destructive and chaotic. Um, whereas the male energy is, solid, unmoving, you know, maintains its stability. So when that male energy, when that masculine energy is becoming toxic, it's when you become unreachable. You sort of like you're a cliff face. The ocean can't get to you. There's no balance there.
Yeah.
You're unreachable. There's no life. It becomes barren because no life can exist on something that is unreachable.
Okay.
Whereas
Yeah.
when that ocean is raging
Mm.
and it's destructive in a man, how that destructive tendencies manifest is that you start to impose yourself on others. You look for fights. You become destructive, but in a way a man can be, which is physically destructive. These are very traditional definitions, by the way. I know men can be emotionally destructive. That's true too.
I'm just I'm trying to find the. I know you're trying to draw a line between the two, but for me, it feels like very similar.
Which part are you getting?
So,
Which part is where's the bleeding into each other
so
occurring?
the confusing part for me is that you're saying that the male will actually like um remove himself from the from
Yeah, toxic masculinity, in my interpretation, is when you just isolate and you cut the world
you
off.
cut the world off, right? But
Yeah,
uh, how does the
as a man now.
yeah, okay, so say for example you cut the world off, right? You're
Yeah.
now living in your full masculine energy, right?
Well, remember that's not necessarily true. It's not full masculine energy. A masculine energy is it's like a caregiver provider energy. It's a protector energy. That's when it's operating at its highest level.
Right. So when you say cut, you cut yourself off, right? How would you deal with the person that's cut themselves off, or how would they react in that situation? If,
What do you mean?
like, say for example, you cut yourself off, right?
Yeah.
And I came to speak to you, right? how would your
I wouldn't engage. It's like if I've now withdrawn, right, and you as my friend see that and you're concerned about me, I would avoid you. I would not engage, or I would just be very short with everything and try to get away from you as quickly as possible.
but
Essentially,
I feel like that's just avoidance.
it is, but that's what the unapproachable cliff face is.
Okay, but yeah, I'm just feeling how is that toxic though?
It's not healthy. I mean, no
No,
man
but
is an island.
it's internally toxic. How is it toxic to other people?
It doesn't have to be toxic to other people. It could be toxic to other people in the sense that they've now lost a part of their lives.
Uh,
And people that were depending on you are no longer able to depend on you. People that cared about you, you've essentially removed an entire person from their
yeah, but
lives.
is that toxic?
It can be the way you go about it is like if you're completely dismissive of people, it can hurt them. I mean, if you're a part of someone's life and all of a sudden you're not there anymore, that's upsetting to people.
Okay, I'm trying to.
It can be hurtful. If someone just cuts you out of their life, it can be hurtful.
No, I can, but
And they
I
won't give
feel
you a
like that's
reason,
I
they
feel
won't
like
engage with
that's
you at
yeah.
all.
No, I
I
get
mean, good is getting at that is indirect impacts of something,
yeah,
you
but
know.
I
Indirect or
don't feel like
direct, it doesn't
that's
change the fact
I
that
don't
there's
feel like that's
impact.
specifically toxic. I feel like yes, I can be hurt by somebody, but it doesn't feel to me like that's toxic.
Maybe it's the definition then, because what we're saying is it's not necessarily toxic to other people, but it is toxic energy.
To yourself.
Yes. So there's still a level of toxicity there. And it can still be toxic to people. It's just not as direct as maybe something else is going in, verbally abusing someone or physically abusing them. But there's an emotional level of abuse that's happening here because this person is now upset that you're no longer in their life and you won't engage with them and tell them why. You've now created a loss, and there's someone's now busy going through like essentially a grieving process because they've lost somebody and they can't complete that or get closure on it because you won't provide any logical reason as to why you've done so.
So how is that? I'm just trying to understand how that is. The person or the guy in this case would stonewall themselves, right?
Yeah.
Completely. But how is that removing the? To me, that's removing both um, feminine and masculine energy because they're suppressing both.
Not necessarily. They can still go be destructive in their own time away from everybody. You
Mm.
can let the anger and aggression
But
out
that's
without hurting anybody.
self-deprecation.
Not necessarily. Self-deprecation is when you put yourself down.
But
Here you just instead of like there's a destructive energy within you, you go to a gym and you take it out on the bag. That's a manifestation of that destructive energy coming out because it's coming from a place of anger. It's not coming from a place of I want to work on my hand speed or anything like that. It's just I'm angry, I want to hit something,
sure, but
but I'm going to
how is
do so
that?
without
Yeah,
causing
but
any harm.
remember we're discussing toxic masculinity. So how is that toxic to the like if
No, your question was
yeah.
how is it not both?
Okay,
So
fine. Yeah, sure.
that's an
No,
example
but
of
I
how it's
mean,
not
I'm
both.
still trying to relate it back to toxic masculinity. In my mind, I'm trying to understand how that's toxic to like all the people around you, other than the fact that
No, it
you've
doesn't have
removed
to be
yourself.
toxic to all the people around you. Because remember, when someone is being toxic to other people, they're not necessarily being toxic to themselves. They're being outwardly toxic. One is outwardly toxic, one is inwardly toxic. And there's your yin and yang.
Mm. Okay, I'm
I
missing
don't know if
something.
that answered it
I'm
or
missing
that just
something.
created more questions.
Yeah, I'm missing something.
One is outwardly toxic, one is inwardly toxic.
Sure, but to me, my understanding. Okay, let me put it to you this way. My understanding of toxic masculinity is somebody who, as you say, I do agree that they've suppressed their feminine side, right? But
Yeah.
it's resulting in them reacting to the people around them in a specific way. So they act overly macho, they act overly aggressive, they act overly negative towards the feminine energies in other people, and that's how I would understand toxic masculinity.
So
That's
you know that
that's
overreaction you're referring to?
yeah.
I'm just simplifying that into destructive behavior.
Okay. Okay.
And destructive energy is chaotic energy at its core, and chaotic energy is feminine energy.
Sure.
And within a man, when that feminine energy is suppressed, it becomes even more destructive.
Okay, but yeah, I just can't picture how the person would withdraw um, into themselves in that situation because they're being outwardly toxic to other people, right?
No, no. So that's when that's toxic femininity within a man. When a man is toxically masculine, then it's not outwardly toxic, it's inwardly toxic.
Okay.
Now, I can't talk to how this would work in a
So
female where a
basic,
woman is toxically feminine or toxically masculine.
yeah. So
I have
base.
no idea. I'm just giving you my interpretation of what I see.
Okay, so my understanding is actually that what I've labeled is actually reverse to what you're labeling.
Somewhat, yes.
So you're reversing the definition essentially, because toxic femininity would be the person who's bottled femininity, right? But
Yeah.
is releasing it onto others,
Yes, it's the release
right?
of that energy.
And toxic
That's it.
masculinity,
That's exactly it.
toxic,
It's when it's toxic is when it's been suppressed and then
right?
released.
So then in your definition, toxic masculinity would be someone like a feminist who's bottled masculine energy and then is releasing it onto others.
Ooh, I haven't thought about that angle yet.
So that's how I would understand it, if we're saying it that way, you know, um, where
Hmm.
because you get
Because I
those
mean that is
toxic
sort of the
you get
counterpart
those
to,
toxic
yeah.
feminists that have bottled masculine energy and are now releasing it on other people.
Oh, actually, that is a good definition because toxic feminists, right?
Yeah,
They are very unwilling to move on their definitions, and they like put up walls as soon as you try and make a logical argument against them,
yeah.
which is essentially a withdrawal. It's an unmoving withdrawal. So yes, that is exactly what I'm saying.
Okay, so I'm understanding your definition, but your definition
Yes,
is literally counter to the
popular definition.
internet's definition.
Yes,
Let's put it that way, right? So
but
you're
I always said I never
but
agreed with it. So
that's because you've linked chaotic not, is the word that you used chaotic or chaos, right?
yeah, feminine
To
energy is
feminine
chaotic and
destructive.
creative,
Yeah,
but can be destructive. Yes,
yeah.
it's either creative or destructive, but creative and destructive is the same side of the chaos coin. Chaos can either create or destroy.
See, the only reason I still want to understand it from the original point of view is, like you say, masculinity is what did you say? The caregiving and the protective energies, right?
Protective provider, yeah, that
Protective
kind of those
provider.
things.
But
Stability,
yeah, but when you
safety.
have that in a man, right? And now that man is now a toxic narcissist person, right? What do? They result in the manner of being aggressive and being, they overdo that. And that's how I understood it in the beginning. Um,
Well, they aren't overdoing any of the good things. They're all overdoing the chaotic things.
right, and that's why
Narcissists tend to seek out
that's
chaos.
why
They
it's
they
toxic,
tend to
right?
destroy.
That's why it's
Yeah.
toxic. Um, but yeah, I guess your definition and let's say the internet's definition uh, have the same outcome. They just the
Yeah, one
underlying
is
basis
bad.
the,
You get there
the
differently.
underlying basis is different. The
Yeah.
underlying basis is the opposite. But yeah, okay,
Yes.
I'm understanding what you
Yeah.
Sure, that was a doozy one to get through.
mean. No, but I
No,
mean
but
it.
it's good that we work through the different variations and understandings. Because if we have these uh, different understandings as well, so do other people.
No, look, I want to actually do
And
some
different points
research
of
on
view.
that because to me,
Yeah.
this yeah, I want to understand it from Dean's point of view, but also like there must be somebody who, like the guy who coined toxic masculinity. I want to understand what his definition is.
Yep.
Is
And I guess that's going to
Moha's
be our poll
Moha's
question for this
Moha's
week. What is your
Moha's
definition of that particular phrase?
yeah
Yeah.
Moha's
Look, as I said to people that are listening here, that is how I understand it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And if the definition can help you make sense of things and you get positive outcomes, then great. If it just confuses you, then tough it and go with the conventional definition.
Mm-hmm. So, you guys have mentioned during that discussion, as well as previous questions and the answers to them, The different forms, like we've touched on narcissism a lot, for example. What other forms are there of toxicity and being, you know, bad toward other people?
I think Dean and I discussed this one once. It's not bad to other people, but there's toxic positivity as well,
Mm-hmm.
which is
Yeah.
something that when someone said the words to me first time, I was like, oh, okay. I didn't think about that, but it makes sense. You
Mm-hmm.
can be overly positive all the time, right?
Yeah.
And that can also be toxic. Um, yeah, that for me was a bit of a doozy as well. I was like, oh, okay, I didn't see that one coming.
Yeah, well, too much sugar will give you diabetes. It's context. If people are not in the space where they can receive that positivity, it's just going to make them worse. Um, you know, it, like you cannot live life without context.
That's true. So like you mentioned, positive toxicity, and just being overly, I guess, positive toward any situation. Have you encountered that, or did you yourself ever?
Yeah.
Um,
I try to be a realist where I can,
mhm.
um, but sometimes I like to be a little bit more positive. And
Has it has okay? So what I'm trying to get at is, has it had any detrimental side effects for you
I
in
don't
any
know if I've
situation?
ever been toxically positive.
I think it can in the sense that you might expect too much of yourself. If you
Yeah.
try to be like constantly positive and you're like, oh, I should do this, I should do that, I can do this, I can do that. But then when you don't have the resources or the means or the energy even,
Mm.
then what started out as being positive then becomes an unbalanced expectation.
Yeah,
And it's
that's
an
definitely true.
unrealistic expectation on
Yeah,
yourself, and it can lead you to being very hard on yourself and a lot of self criticism, and you know, that's maybe when it's not so healthy.
yeah.
I
Also,
mean,
yeah, yeah,
go ahead, coach.
yeah. So
Sorry.
also, to the people around you, say you're always positive, right? And they dealing with something, right?
Mm.
And you're like, let's be positive about it. And they're like, no, I need to actually deal with this thing in front of me, you know?
Yeah.
And that's where it can actually impact. And
Oh, it could also alienate people. Like they may not
yeah,
want to come to you
yeah, yeah,
because
sure.
it may feel like you won't understand them. You're just going to
Yeah,
give them some positive nonsense. And you're like, well, this person doesn't actually understand what I'm going through. They're just going to tell me to be positive and push through
yeah.
Mm.
rather than provide me with some
I
empathy
have
and,
dealt with it. I have
understanding.
dealt with that, right? So if sometimes I am naturally positive because I like to look at the positive side of or the optimism side of the situation, right? And sometimes people need to deal with their situations, right? And someone's told me, listen, I need to deal with this. This is something that I need to deal with. Then you realize, okay, maybe that person is not used to me being naturally this optimistic, right? Even in a difficult situation, right? So then you have to also understand where you need to be more of a realist as well.
I guess that's employing your emotional intelligence of the environment and situation
Sure.
that you're in. Um, like some people, as you'll have mentioned, just want you to listen
Yeah,
in
Yeah.
yeah,
situations and not offer solutions or not offer quick quips from Instagram, for example.
yeah.
True.
Um, so that sort of thing. So I agree with that. You can be toxic in terms of positivity as well. And then I think finally, grouping all of this together, what we've discussed today, how does then a person start to address the toxicity within themselves, and how do we also help those identify them if we ever come across them? I know like Dean mentioned, he deals with it at the situation, nips it in the bud, sort of thing.
Well, as early as possible.
No,
Sometimes
as
it's
early as
not
possible, yeah.
possible to do it in the situation, but as soon
But then
as you can.
how does then one identify it within themselves? Like realistically looking at ourselves,
Oh, it's like if I'm being
how
toxic.
yeah, how did we move from? Remember, Prush, you brought up that our youth, for example, like we've identified it now that we were perhaps being, no,
Yeah.
not perhaps, we were being toxic back then, but knowing what we know now, how can we?
Honestly, empathy is the answer to all of these questions. If you just put yourself in the other person's shoes and go, well, how would I feel if someone did that to me?
Yeah.
You'll know very quickly. It's just that we don't do that enough. Well, at least I never used to do it enough. But if you actually just stop and think about how you're making someone else feel, and if you were in their position, and you'll never know exactly how they're feeling, but you can do your best. You can at least make an effort. Just put yourself in their shoes and go, right, if someone did this to me, how would it make me feel? You know very quickly. It's not nice.
So being more of an empath, having that higher level of emotional intelligence, reading situations, reading the environment, can assist you in
Consideration,
consideration.
yeah, tolerance as well. Things like that. Like it really all just boils down to that one like parent word, empathy.
Yeah, I agree with you. That's probably so. Dean, like you said, Dean would nip it in the bud early, but it's coming from a point of he can see that this is the best way to deal with the situation.
Yeah, it
And
comes from years of not nipping in the bud early
no, but even
and learning the
I
hard
think
way.
even in the beginning, you probably tried to take that person aside and explain it to them, and then they reacted in a different way. So now you found the best way to deal with that situation is actually to stand in front of them and say, "Listen, it's either going to be me standing or you standing at the end, but when we're done, you're going to understand why you're being toxic, you know." And that, I think,
Yeah, but I mean, with narcissists, it's a very different
sure,
approach. Like I
sure,
said, if it's someone that's not actually just
yeah,
a giant douchebag, they just don't realize they're overstepping. Then it's always a take it offline and have a conversation. And generally, they have the emotional maturity to go. Actually, I see where you're coming from.
yeah.
It's only when I tried to take a narcissist aside and have a heart to heart with them did I realize what an idiot I was being. Um, so in a case like that, you have to let themselves reveal themselves as a narcissist to everyone and then shine a giant spotlight. And then after that, you get a little bit of peace and quiet. That's not a particularly healthy way. It's borderline toxic as well.
I was
Always
about
toxic,
to. I was
actually.
about to ask.
I acknowledge that. I
No, well,
recognize it. But,
Dean, you're fighting
you know,
fire with fire there. That's what you're doing.
yeah, but that's not a healthy thing either. It's
Well,
just
for
the
you,
best tool I
for you,
have.
it's
That's why it's like, this is currently the best tool I have. So until I find a better one, and I am looking for a better one, I just don't know what it is yet. So listeners, if you do, put it in the comments.
Let us know on your ways of dealing with
Yes.
toxicity in your lives.
Our 5 regular viewers.
Yep.
to be honest with you, I feel like the next time I come up against a toxic person and I realize they're being toxic, I'm just gonna openly say, "Listen, you're being toxic. Stop it." And if they explode after that, I'd probably not do anything. I'd just leave it. Because especially with
So you
people
so
like
you
that,
let them vent and then
no,
that's
because
it.
when you tell someone, or like Dean is saying, when you go after somebody like that, but when you just leave it after that, they it will naturally go and internalize it later, right? And when they internalize it later, it'll either get them more angry or they'll realize. If they get more angry, then they tend towards narcissism, right? If they realize it, then they'll stop doing it. If they're tending towards narcissism, to be honest with you, nothing's going to fix that. They have to
Yeah, you
realize
can't
it
help
for
that person.
themselves, right?
All
But
you can do is just make them more
I
hesitant to
think, Dean,
behave
that's
that way.
probably the best way to go from where you are now in terms of fighting fire with fire to coming closer to a state where you don't emotionally wreck yourself for the rest of the day by doing something like that. You know, um, because
Yeah,
fighting,
that's
standing
true.
up to somebody else, knowing you
That shit's
as well,
tiring,
it's
man.
tiring, bro. So what I would say
It's
is
upsetting.
the best thing to do for yourself, right, is to just openly and honestly, without raising any anger within yourself, is to say, listen, even in front of 50 people, you're like, listen, you're being toxic, just stop it, right? And then if they say, how am I being toxic? You just don't ignore them after that, and you'll see how people just they either learn what they're doing or they explode after that, and then you know. Because you know you get those people
Yeah,
who are
but
like,
a
"What do you mean I'm being
narcissist will
toxic?
explode.
What do you mean I'm being
Yeah, they
toxic?
get super defensive.
Explain to me why I'm
And
being toxic." And then you're like, "Well, I just said it. That's all you need to understand. And then you leave them and you see how people just fucking explode after that.
Well, you'll
No,
leave them
because
to
then
kind of
if they
internalize and learn
really
on their
do
own.
want to understand, then I would rather explain. And like I always, if anyone ever does go, "Oh, how am I being like this?" Then I'll generally try and lay it out in terms of logic and like detach and go, right, this is what you did, and this is why it's not very nice.
Yeah.
But like with a narcissist, they'll always go on the defensive and play the victim card. It's like, well, how can you say that about me? Or, like you're just projecting, or, I'm just trying to help. I'm like, no, you're not. You're being deliberately difficult, and everyone can see it.
See, you're saying it so easily now, but in the situation.
No, in the situation,
Yeah.
like
But that's
holding back
that's
the
what I'm
rage.
saying. I think it's all I don't know. I naturally tend to just be like, slow down. What's the problem? Right? But I don't go out there and label it and then be like, you're doing this, you're I generally tend to just leave people like that alone.
Not engage.
Yeah.
It's fine for you, but it's generally not okay in the whole environment because they just
Yeah, sure.
continue to behave that way in the environment. And the thing is,
Uh,
like, when you're working in a team environment constantly with people, then it, like you can't get away from it then.
Yeah, look, I think I'd probably react after a while as well.
Yeah.
But yeah. I don't know, I've never been in a situation where the person was consistently in my face as well.
mm. I guess
Mm.
there are perhaps improved ways of.
No, there's definitely better
Um,
ways than what I'm doing.
no, I mean, yeah, I mean, we just don't know about them at this point, and we can certainly find out about them, and people can educate us as well on what those methods are, for example.
Yeah.
Well, that's all I had for this particular discussion. We went through quite a bit in terms of toxicity against and within ourselves as well, and how to identify it, and what corrective actions, I guess, we can take, and what someone else can take against someone else who is kind of trespassing against them. So with that in mind, any other finalizing comments, guys?
Yeah, I think there's other toxic things that we haven't discussed, but I guess
Mm.
um
Like I said, this is the first one in a series.
oh, we're doing a series of toxic things.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Oh, wow.
Whoa. I didn't see that.
Okay.
A series of unfortunate
Well,
toxicity.
you can be emotionally toxic too. You pull
Yeah.
the I'm not speaking to you move,
The ghosting, all those sort of
ghosting,
things.
Yeah,
yeah.
like we can be the inwardly toxic as well stuff as well that we can
Yeah.
talk about, like when you're toxic to yourself.
Yeah.
Correct. I mean, as we touched upon, using that whole masculinity, femininity discussion,
Yeah.
withdrawing and things like that, disengaging, I think Dean mentioned it, that withdrawal is emotionally hurting other people because, if you're a significant part of their lives and you just pull away suddenly, it gets them
Yeah.
to wonder what they did, and what was wrong with them,
Yeah.
that sort of thing.
If
And,
yeah.
and that perhaps is your inadvertent intention to be hurtful in that way.
Yeah. What would you say that we should do if, say, for example, you're like a person that's consistently afflicted by someone who's toxic, right? And
Mhm.
you're not the type of person to either be like me, where you just withdraw and then you're like, okay, I don't really have this person has their own problems that doesn't really impact me because I'm me and I'm happy with me, right?
Mhm.
And you're not like Dean, where you'll literally go and tell that person, listen, you're being a douchebag, right? Um, what about those people that don't react in those two ways or comfortable with themselves and keep getting afflicted? What would be the best way for
So,
that person to deal with the situation?
so are you saying then that person is just comfortable taking the pain or taking the
Not comfortable
abuse?
taking the pain, but don't know how to react. You know, because every
If
time
someone is putting themselves,
it's like when you raise an argument, but the toxic person is just uh,
too overbearing, too
overbearing
powerful,
or
yeah.
knows how to raise a better argument than you.
Mm-hmm.
What do you do as that person? Because I'm sure there's a lot of people like
Yeah, who
That's
who are
true.
kind of
Yeah.
shy to speak up,
that. Yeah. Or
who
not
are
confident in themselves to say, listen, I'm me, and whatever you're saying is, you can take it with your own pinch of salt somewhere. Um,
mm,
but yeah, what do those people
You raise an important point because sometimes raising it can put that person in danger.
in harm's way.
Yeah, that's a better way of putting it. It puts them in harm's way. Either emotional or physical damage could be reciprocation.
Yeah.
So I don't actually know what would be the prescribed way to go about that in that case.
Like,
Like if it's
Like I
certain
haven't got a clue.
danger, certain danger, it's like honestly, like as Dean said, we're not authorized to speak on that particular level. But if if someone is, it's unhealthy situation for yourself,
Seek
then you
out
have
seek out
to
support. I would
seek out
say, right?
support. Yep.
Like seek out non-judgmental, genuine support would be the first thing, right? And then once you have support in place, I would then look for either some sort of professional advice or some kind of counseling, potentially from a social worker or a legal professional or a psychologist. But in that case where you might be in danger or there might be threat of retaliation, that's the word, retaliation, not reciprocation, retaliation, then you need to talk to someone that is a lot more learned in these things and can tell you what is the best way to go about this. The counselors are good, like a relationship counselor would be able to advise you a lot better than what we can. But like step one is just get some kind of support in place, like genuine, trustworthy support. And I hope we can all have that, because I understand that sometimes that's hard for people. Like you don't have a safe space, you don't know who you can trust. If that is your situation, then a professional that has no connection to you or your network or your family or anybody else, that's potentially causing you this situation. So someone completely removed from it and outside, go and see that professional, because they'll give you impartial advice and they're not going to go and tell anybody about it. A, because they're legally obligated not to, and because they don't know them anyway.
I like that.
Yeah.
Agreed with that.
Sorry, folks, but that's all we can give you.
Yeah.
If you're in that situation.
I mean, if you're in that extreme of a situation,
Look, even
then
if it's not
that's
that
what you gotta
extreme,
do.
speaking like Dean said, to somebody who's impartial, right, but
Yeah.
also has the understanding to say, listen, because sometimes you also wonder, is it me or is it that person, or am I just feeling like I'm continuously attacked?
Yeah.
Go speak to somebody who's impartial but also has a good understanding of whether this would make sense, and then ask them for a reflection of their opinion. And if you find that they're saying, listen, dude, this person is being really mean to you or they're being toxic to you, then you have a way of saying, listen, okay, but explain both sides of the story. Don't just tell them, I feel like this all the time. Then they can get an honest view and then say, listen, but I read something earlier that said, if someone tells you that they felt hurt by what you did, right? You have no right to say that you didn't, or that they don't feel that way.
You can't invalidate their
You
feelings.
can't invalidate their feelings. So if someone comes to you and you're a toxic person, or you feel like you're being attacked, and you literally feel like you're being attacked, then go and voice your opinion with that person, not in a combative manner, but explain to them why you feel that way, right? And then if they want to fight with you some more, then you know the type of person you're dealing with. But if they're open and realize what they've done, or if you realize that maybe you're feeling that way from an internal problem and not from them doing what they're doing, then you also have a learning lesson from that.
You guys want to hear something funny?
No, tell us.
So there was one person that they essentially said something quite offensive in the office, and I called them out on it, and their response was, offense can only be taken, it cannot be given. It's not my fault if people get offended. I was like, oh my god, I don't even know where to begin. Suffice to say, that ended up in disciplinary action for that individual.
Oh wow.
Well, listen, it depends on what they
This, like-
said, right? It depends on what they said.
It was something that was generally quite
Okay,
offensive to the individual on the receiving end.
Was it over the line? That's the question.
Oh yeah, it was well
Okay,
offside.
then yeah, fair
It was
enough.
well,
Yeah,
like,
fair.
like, I know these things are open to interpretation, but when someone says something and like the entire room goes quiet and you're like, oh my god, I can't believe they said that.
Yeah.
It was one of those moments. Like,
Okay.
it was so far offside, there was no room for interpretation.
Yeah, well, I
Right.
hope they got punished.
Like-
I hope they got punished.
And it was like I thought I could speak to this person, quietly,
Yeah.
and be like, you know what, let's try and resolve this. And then I realized very quickly, like, I can't help this all.
Yikes.
So people don't
But
have.
that was an example of them going, I'm not prepared to take responsibility for my own actions.
Yeah, but you see,
Like that statement of
yeah,
offense
yeah,
can only be taken, it can't be given, is basically going, right, it's your fault.
yeah, it's your fault that
I'm
I
not
said
even going to
something
take a
bad.
moment. Yeah,
Yeah,
like I'm not going to take a moment to look at myself as if I might be the problem.
and then you get bushwhacked. But yeah, you get people that are like, they just there's no filter.
Well, there's no even understanding.
I think in this
as well
particular
from them.
case, it wasn't necessarily a lack of filter. I think it was a lack of context and empathy for the person they were speaking to.
Yeah.
But
Well, alrighty. If there is anything else,
no.
I think we'll close on that. We are on a bit of a time limit here as well.
Before you get load shedded.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the shed
exactly.
is coming 8 minutes from now.
Mm-hmm. So I think we'll wrap that particular discussion up for now. We do have a series of these discussions coming along on the negativity side. So we'll pick up some more of this later on. So with you listeners, thank you very much for tuning in once again. We really appreciate you, and we really hope you have a powerful week ahead. So take care, and
Bye.
good night and good day. Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.